Imagine nearly every nation around the world agreeing on one urgent demand: an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza. Now picture a single country, one with immense global influence, standing alone to block that demand as millions suffer. Why would the United States risk global outrage to cast the only veto against peace? Today, we're unraveling the high-stakes clash of money, alliances, and strategy that plays out behind closed doors at the United Nations. To really grasp what happened, let's step back and set the scene. The conflict in Gaza has grown increasingly dire. More than 2 million people remain trapped in a strip just a few miles wide, with over 80% now displaced and facing shortages so severe that Doctors Without Borders reports hospitals are running out of both staff and life-saving supplies. World Bank analysts estimate the destruction in Gaza has surpassed $18.5 billion, and humanitarian aid trickles in at a painfully slow pace, despite mounting famine. This level of devastation has not gone unnoticed. The United Nations Security Council, made up of 15 members, recently voted on a resolution calling for a permanent ceasefire and immediate, unrestricted access for aid workers. 14 countries agreed. Only the United States said no, using its unique veto power to block the measure. One expert, Robert Malley, put it bluntly: the U.S. veto isolates Washington and undermines its credibility as a mediator. But this move is not without precedent. Since the early 1970s, the United States has used its veto more than 40 times to shield Israel from Security Council resolutions it considers threatening. This staunch support traces back to a strategic alliance that has shaped not only regional politics but also billions of dollars in military aid and technology sharing. Acting U.S. Ambassador Dorothy Shea explained, "We want peace, but peace cannot mean letting Hamas regroup and rearm." The U.S. position? Any resolution that fails to demand Hamas's disarmament and withdrawal is a non-starter. Critics, however, see it very differently. Hossam Zaki of the Arab League called the U.S. move a disregard for the collective will of the international community. Even among Americans, the tide is shifting. A recent Pew survey found that 62% now support a ceasefire in Gaza. Meanwhile, the global consensus is overwhelming. The UN General Assembly echoed the Security Council's call, with 121 nations voting for a ceasefire and only a handful abstaining. So why does the United States continue to stand apart, risking diplomatic isolation and international backlash? Is it all about strategic interests, or are there deeper motivations, political, economic, or even technological, that drive this unwavering support for Israel? As pressure mounts both abroad and at home, a critical question emerges. Could this single veto reshape the future of the conflict and America's role on the world stage? So, what does this American veto actually mean for the future? Let's explore a few possible paths, each one carrying its own risks and opportunities for the world. First, the risk of a catastrophic regional escalation is real. Experts warn that without a ceasefire, the Gaza conflict could spill across borders. A single miscalculation by Israel, Hamas, or another actor like Hezbollah could draw in Lebanon, Iran, or even more distant powers. In that case, we are not just talking about Gaza or Israel. We are talking about a risk that could shake the entire Middle East, disrupt vital oil supplies, and send global energy prices soaring. The ripple effects would reach every continent, from food prices in Africa to fuel bills in Europe and Asia. Second, there is the grim possibility of a prolonged grinding stalemate. Robert Malley, former U.S. Special Envoy, puts it bluntly: the U.S. veto isolates Washington and undermines its credibility as a mediator. If the violence drags on, so too will humanitarian suffering. The World Bank now estimates that damage to Gaza's infrastructure has surpassed $18.5 billion US. Over 80% of Gaza's population is displaced, and Doctors Without Borders describes the medical situation as beyond crisis. The longer this lasts, the harder it will be for any peace process to take root, and the more entrenched the bitterness on both sides becomes. But there is also hope. A third scenario could see renewed diplomatic momentum. With heavyweights like Egypt and Qatar in the mix, and even a possible shift in U.S. policy after the next election, there is a chance for a phased approach. First, a humanitarian pause, then exchanges of prisoners and hostages, then finally, talks about borders and security. Gilead Sher, a former Israeli negotiator, says, "A phased approach is the only way forward. Security, then diplomacy. If outside powers bring enough pressure and incentives, peace is not impossible, even if it feels distant today." So why is the U.S. risking so much by standing almost alone? Beyond the headlines, America's decision is driven by deep strategic interests. Israel is Washington's closest military ally in the region, a fact reflected in decades of security cooperation, intelligence sharing, and over $3 billion per year in aid. Protecting Israel is seen as protecting American influence in the Middle East, ensuring access to vital military technology, and maintaining a strategic counterweight to Iran and Russia. But there is more. Technology is a hidden thread. Israel is a global leader in cybersecurity, AI, and missile defense systems. Much of this technology flows into U.S. defense networks, and joint projects benefit both nations. Some analysts believe Washington's long-term plan is to maintain a technological edge by keeping Israel both dependent and strong. For viewers, what are the practical lessons? First, international politics is rarely about moral clarity. Even overwhelming popular support, over 60% of Americans say they want a ceasefire, does not always shape foreign policy. Economic and security interests often outweigh humanitarian concerns. Second, global events affect us all. What happens in Gaza could hit your wallet, your gas tank, or even your job, as supply chains and markets react to instability. Understanding these links helps you read between the lines of the news and anticipate changes before they reach your doorstep. And third, your voice, and the voices of millions, still matter. The U.S. government is not immune to public pressure, especially in an election year. The more the public demands transparency and accountability, the harder it becomes for hidden interests to go unchallenged. Let's wrap this up. The U.S. veto of the UN Gaza Ceasefire resolution was not just a diplomatic move. It was the latest chapter in a decades-old story of alliances, interests, and realpolitik. But as fractures deepen, both globally and within America, new questions arise. Will Washington's stance drive peace or prolong war? Will technology and security interests always trump humanitarian needs? Here's a secret fact. Since 1972, the U.S. has used its UN veto over 40 times to shield Israel, more than any other issue. Each time, the world's response has grown louder. Sooner or later, even the most powerful alliances face a reckoning. If you found these insights valuable, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. What future do you see for Gaza and the world after this